Hello and welcome. I hope you had an enjoyable weekend. It was really quite beautiful here in LA this weekend. And I was listening to what is going to be shared today, at least what the topic was. And what popped into my head was the word change, concept of change. And it's interesting how many people, how many of us dislike change. And or the counter opposite to that, right? The extreme opposite of that is how many of us have to change because they cannot stand complacency. Right? So those are the two spectrums of change. Absolutely terrified of it and can't even keep anything the same because they have to keep changing. So that's the extremes. And I was, again, this is not scripted, so when you see me looking around, it's because, one, I'm listening and processing and looking at the different examples that come through my brain. And it's interesting, so the fear part of change is usually the other side of that fear aspect is not knowing what things will be like if you do change, right? So if you have to change jobs, all the people involved in that environment, or if you're going to like it, or if you have to move states, the same applies. Are you going to like the neighborhood? Are you going to find a house? Are you going to find a job? Blah, 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 right? So all those things are an attempt to look into the future and have some sense of control. Well, just saying it out loud, if you're listening, you know that is not possible, right? So what do you do with that? So looking too far ahead creates anxiety. The anxiety that it produces will then disallow us to listen to our intuition, listen to our direction, get into a flow that needs to happen to create some sense of comfort or safety. So it's necessary that anxiety needs to be alleviated. So how do you alleviate it? One is, in any emotional situation, doing your best to remove the emotional part, which means asking yourself, is my mind referring back to a time where things didn't work out? Whether that's in your childhood or whatnot. There was flashing on a scenario where I was doing a reading for somebody, and there was a anxiety about going to this work meeting that was happening in another state. And this person just couldn't understand why there was so much anxiety about just going to the meeting, because her instincts were telling her there was going to be some big stuff happening at the meeting. And her fear and anxiety, because she was trying to figure out what was going to happen, that anxiety created an uplifting effect on old memories about people making decisions about her and her life. So when she grew up, her family, on really without any explanation or preparation, decided to move the family back and forth from coast to coast, and Europe to States, and Europe to Canada, and whatever. And that was what she understood. And so all the history of somebody else commanding your life came up. And so she was attempting to see how she was going to control the scenario, because she could feel that that was something similar. It had a similar vibration. And when I was working with her, I asked her, how is this repetitive from your childhood? And a certain age came up so that she could refer back to a more specific time frame of her childhood. Because when people come to see me to talk about being stuck or fears, emotions, whatever, the biology that holds all of the memory, all the RAM of this person's life becomes accessible to me, to us, via guidance and intuition and the unconscious mind. And so that's what I've trained myself to do, is to be able to say, hey, this feels like this back in your past. Let's look at how they're similar, because they feel like they're similar. And how does that make sense? So when I suggested to her that there's something in the past about this type of energy and scenario, she remembered all the traveling that they had to do and had no control, and she had to make new friends and all this sort of stuff. And she absolutely had no connection to, one, being work time now in her 30s-ish and in her teens, right? So the body is amazing. I love, 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 love how the body does this. Do I take credit? I only take credit in that I'm able to, boop, put them together. I'm a puzzle piece person. Do you know those little puzzles? I used to love word searches. The word searches were one of my favorite. I don't like crossword puzzles at all, because words are not my thing. Actually. And it's those mazes where you have to go from one end to another, right, without hitting the walls and the blocks and the whatnot. I remember I can visually go through all of it like that, without stumbling block. And then I could retrace it with a pen, and I was done. And I kind of do the same thing with the body, mind, spirit. So, so the change for her in that energy resonance was similar to her childhood. So we had to have her look at that. And once the psyche actually has an understanding of where the memory is coming from, it tends to, just by itself, start calming down. And then you actually do have some control as to how you want to implement shifts at that point. So while you don't have control about the outcome, and you can do some affirmations and whatnot, right? So you're not completely out of control. However, that fear and anxiety that comes up for situations that come up from your past that are unresolved, they will keep that anxiety going. And so looking for ways to calm the brain, and there are some homework that I gave her, and there are some tasks for her to do mentally. And then I did some energetic healing. So, wherever in her biology that happened to be stuck, got some shift in energy. And so, right, so that's the package. So too far ahead and looking in the future is going to cause anxiety. So then we go to the flip side, and we go to constantly having to change, right? Constantly having to change is the inability for there to be some stillness. And so why is movement always necessary? Otherwise, somehow the energy feels unsafe or boring, right? Or boring. So what happens in the times of stillness and boredom? Well, what I'm hearing is that for some people, boredom helps to create more sensory awareness, because you're kind of in a quiet, still spot, and so all the periphery becomes that much louder. So that's one thing. What else would stillness and the need for movement? One would be physical harm, right? So if someone would be raised in a environment where there was physical harm that happened because you were still, that would teach the cells and the nervous system that sitting still is dangerous. Makes sense, right? And or instead of just physical harm, what if there was energetic harm, emotional harm? What if somebody when they were younger and they were sitting quietly and the family member would yell at them saying, "Why aren't you doing something? Get up!" Whatever, right? But like loudly, right? Not just in a general dialogue. So that kind of startle that happens, and so the body remembers all that. And so while you are no longer in that scenario, your nervous system relates energy palpation to energy palpation, and the unconscious mind says, oh, these are the same things, so don't sit still, because sitting still, something happens. Something unsafe, something loud, something unexplainable. So the person would likely have a requirement that something has to change all the time. For a different input, right? Listening for guidance if there's another scenario, because there's always 3, and I'm not sure that I hit 3. There's always 3. Okay, so the third one is just to be passive and actually not do anything about anything, and just see what happens. And if change happens, that's fine. If change doesn't happen, that's fine. I'm not really in control either way. Just whatever I'm allowed to have is what I'll have. So that's kind of the third scenario. So you can check and see which one of these you fit more of a tendency. Everybody has, everybody has a little bit of everything, but what's your tendency? Where's your majority sit, right? And there are definitely ways of retraining your system, your nervous system, because it is more of a nervous system issue as much as it is an unconscious belief. And so we change the beliefs, and then we re-educate the nervous system, and the likelihood is that things calm down, and the next time you get up to matching that kind of energy scenario, it will not be as detrimental. It may not be as severe. You may get through it more relaxed, and then each time you get through it, again, you support the change, you support the shift. It gets easier again the following time. Sometimes shifts will happen and then they're kind of done. It all depends on the scenario. If you think of your biology as your hard drive, with the hard drive and the computer reference, it makes it kind of easy, because we know that on some platforms, drives have to be, it's all too familiar. Drives have to be repaired internally. Sometimes things crash. Sometimes you get a virus. Sometimes you get a little virus. Sometimes you get a massive mega virus, right? So all these things are replications in the technology that happen to us in our biology. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, I think, about that middle section, which is the be passive, do nothing, wait for things to happen. And then respond. So once things happen, then you'll respond, right? This happens a lot in the concept of spirituality, in that there were some really wonderful people sharing how to better your spirituality by trusting universe, spirit, God to handle things for you. And on some level, it does happen. On another level, we must meet that energy spirit halfway. If you want something to be accomplished in change, you must meditate on it, make affirmations about it so that your belief system starts kicking in. At the same time, you cannot just say to yourself, well, I'm doing my meditation and I'm writing in my journal about it, and so I'm just waiting for it to happen. No. You're hoping it's going to happen. And if it does, then that technique worked great. And if it doesn't, then you go to self-blame, self-worth, typically. Or this technique doesn't work, right? You can give up. So you're either giving up on yourself or you're giving up on the universe technique. So, the missing piece is to actually do some work. There are many times when people say, oh, I need to get a new job, and I've been praying about it, and I've been dreaming about it, and journaling, and lighting candles, and all this sort of stuff. And I ask, so what are you doing to actually look for a job? Well, I kind of look here and there. Okay? That's being passive, hoping something's going to happen. Sometimes it works. But sometimes, a lot of times, many times, it doesn't, especially for the things that you really need to work on, right? So, there's the coaching and the belief work changes so that those things are not in your way, and that's great. And the empowerment of meditation and lighting candles and praying and writing in your journal and having visualizations, yes, absolutely. Absolutely complimentary. The third part, because I tell you, there's always three. And yes, I do have 3 children. So the third part is you must actually do the work. So if you're scared of, intimidated, and feel incapable of making cold calls for that job, then that's what you need to do, and you need to buck up and get going, right? If it's you hate looking in the paper, then that's what you need to do. You need to go into this aspect that you dislike the most, because it's time to grow. Okay? Does it always have to go into the painful part? No. It could be that you just stop thinking about other alternatives, and when talking to someone else, you're going to get those ideas. Okay. The other thing is tell people that you're looking for, obviously safe people. Tell them that you're looking and what you're looking for so that they can help you. Okay. It's not like going out and, hunting. You actually ask for help, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Obviously not from your boss, because he doesn't know that you're leaving the job or looking to. You understand what I'm saying. So that is our discussion for today, my lovelies, and I wish you much empowerment in your pursuit to look and see where you sit regarding change, and perhaps you've gotten some insight as to where change issues and discomforts come from, and you can take a look at that, and I will talk to you another day.